Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. You know, I've talked many times about the caucus room conspiracy and how the Republicans got together the night that Obama was inaugurated and said we're going to do everything we can to block his legislative agendas, to block him from having any successes. And they did. They did a very good job of this outside of 74 legislative days between the time that Al Franken was finally put into the Senate and the time that Scott Brown was elected and sworn in to replace Ted Kennedy. There were 74 days where you had a filibuster-proof Senate. And the president got an amazing amount of stuff done in those 74 days. But with the exception of that, they have successfully obstructed virtually everything. And then on top of that, you get the Supreme Court drilling holes in the things that he actually did get done, like Obamacare, where the Supreme Court said individual states can say, no, we're not going to expand Medicaid. And so working people who don't, who earn too much money to be eligible for the free medical care for the truly poor, because they're working, but they don't earn enough to be eligible for Obamacare subsidies because they're working, part-time or working at McDonald's or, working minimum wage jobs. Those people are screwed. And it's 5.7 million people right now in the United States. But here's the interesting thing. 70% of them are women. 70%. This is extraordinary. But on top of that, it's not just, that. It's that there are billions, hundreds of billions of dollars in federal dollars that would be going to the states. And those states would be hiring doctors and nurses and paying local county hospitals and things, which would create hundreds of thousands of jobs, which is why the Republicans don't want to expand Medicaid, because they don't want those jobs, because they know that, as Bernie pointed out in the last hour, roughly 70% of Americans cannot tell you which party controls the House or the Senate. They can't tell you. But over 90% of Americans know that the president is a Democrat. And so we're seeing right now that the president has, he's the worst president in history. He's, about a third of Americans are saying that. Why? Because for 6 years he hasn't been able to accomplish a whole lot. I mean, there is a substantial list of accomplishments, but, they never talk about it. Here's a quick list. The largest middle-class tax cut in history. I don't know why Obama doesn't point this out more frequently. He saved Chrysler. He saved GM. The loans have been repaid. We went from 800,000 monthly job losses to monthly job gains. Education spending has increased. Student loan costs have decreased. Hate crime laws were strengthened. The Affordable Care Act was passed. Obamacare, the CHIPS, Children Health Insurance Program, was expanded. We are now enforcing child labor laws more aggressively than before because of reforms. Most of these happened in those 74 days, by the way. Wall Street reform, credit card reform, predatory lending to soldiers has been restricted. Troops are now being paid for stop-loss time. Torture has been stopped. VA spending has been increased. Women can now serve on submarines. We have equal pay for women. Nuclear arms reduction and disposal. BP agreed to a $20 billion cleanup fund, although they're now starting to fight that in court. EPA has been strengthened. The FDA powers were broadened. And the healthcare funding for the 9/11 responders was finally passed over, loud objections by Republicans who figured, hey, screw them. Oh, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed, and we're seeing gay marriage spread across the country. I mean, this president has actually accomplished quite a bit, but still, long-term unemployment blocked ever since Christmas. You've got now coming up on 3 million people who have been, we're doing it at the rate of, tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people a week are losing their long-term unemployment benefits because the Republicans in the House, because John Boehner exclusively in the House refuses to bring this thing to the floor for a vote. It passed the Senate. Republicans and Democrats got together in the Senate and actually passed an extension of long-term unemployment benefits. They sent it to the House, and John Boehner alone is standing there saying, no, I'm not going to let it come to the floor. The same thing with immigration reform. The House and the Senate, or the Republicans and the Democrats in the Senate came up with a good, it's a mediocre, but it's better than nothing, a substantial immigration reform legislation. They sent it to the House of Representatives. John Boehner will not allow a vote. Both of these things would pass in a New York minute if you let a vote happen. But Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy, who is now the House Majority Leader, and Eric Cantor, who is then the House Majority Leader, and Pete Sessions and Pete Hoekstra and Dan Lundgren and Jim DeMint and, a bunch of these Republicans got together the night that the president was inaugurated and basically swore a blood oath to each other that they were going to take down this president, even if it meant taking down the American people. In fact, taking down the American people was the juicy part of it. If we can harm the middle class, if we can put people in pain, 20 states, people cannot get health care. Hundreds of billions of dollars are being left on the table. Cause people pain, cause people death. Why? Because they will blame it on Obama. Why? Because our media is so bad, our news reporting is so bad, we are all infotainment all the time, that almost three-quarters of Americans can't tell you that the Republicans are in charge of the House and that they control the Senate with a filibuster. But over 95% of Americans can tell you that the president is a Democrat. So all this parade of horribles. Nancy Pelosi, when she controlled the House, passed legislation that would have brought our factories back home, stopped the tax breaks for outsourcing factories, gave tax breaks for bringing them home. The Republicans in the Senate filibustered it. This is the most common sense piece of legislation that anybody's proposed in the last 20 years. The Republicans filibustered it. Why? Because they don't want the jobs to come home. They want people to be in pain right up until the day Obama leaves office, so they can say that guy was a lousy president, and that and Americans will believe it, and they are believing it. And it's a real tragedy that this is the political strategy of one of the two major parties in this country. Treason.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
I mean, to destroy the lives of millions of Americans intentionally for political gain, what do you call that?